He thought it was a harmless laugh at his expense, a simple jab about his accent. But what she didn't know was that her mockery would set in motion a chain of events that would completely flip her world upside down. You won't believe what he did next to get the ultimate revenge. The lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and fresh paint. Sunlight streamed in through the glass doors, catching the polished floors and the wide reception desk. Behind it sat a young white woman, blonde hair tied in a high ponytail, scrolling lazily on her phone. Beside her, in one of the waiting chairs, another woman, also white, dressed sharply in a gray coat, sipped coffee, her eyes following every person who entered. The glass doors slid open again. Michael stepped in. He was tall, his skin dark and smooth, his shirt carefully ironed, though it was plain and inexpensive. His shoes were clean, but old, polished as if he had spent the night scrubbing them to hide the wear. He held a folder in his hands, the kind tenants carry when they hope for approval. He approached the desk with quiet dignity. His voice, soft but firm, carried the weight of his roots. "Excuse me, ma'am. Is this the right line for apartment inquiries?" The receptionist didn't bother to look up immediately. She tapped her screen, lips twitching with amusement, as though she'd already decided how this conversation would go. Finally, she raised her eyes, and when she heard his words, heard the rhythm of his accent, her smirk widened. "Oh, wow," she said, dragging out the syllable. Her gaze flicked to her friend sitting nearby. "Did you hear that?" The other woman leaned forward, curious. "Say that again, sir," the receptionist said, tilting her head like she was examining an animal at the zoo. "Go on. What did you say?" Michael's grip tightened on the folder. He had rehearsed this moment, walking in with confidence, asking clearly, showing his documents. He swallowed, then repeated, slower this time. "I asked if this is the right line for apartment inquiries. I am interested in renting here." The receptionist's lips curled higher. She repeated his words in a warped parody of his accent, stretching the vowels, twisting the consonants until they sounded like mockery. "Apartment inquiries," she mimicked, leaning back in her chair with exaggerated amusement. Her friend burst into laughter, almost spilling her coffee. Michael's ears burned. His chest felt tight. He forced himself to breathe evenly. "My English is fine," he said firmly, though his voice had dropped slightly. "I can communicate perfectly." The receptionist rolled her eyes. "Oh, sure. I'm not saying you can't, but you know how neighbors can be. People here like to understand each other. It's just—" She smiled sweetly, twisting the knife. "With that accent, you might not fit in." Her friend giggled again. "Yeah, maybe he should try another neighborhood," she chimed in, her tone dripping with condescension. The words landed harder than any punch. Michael stood there, folder still clutched in his hands, every rejection of his life flashing back at once. The professor who once told him his presentations were hard to follow. The store clerk who pretended not to understand his questions. The boss who joked about needing subtitles when he spoke. And now this. A quiet rage stirred in his chest. Not the kind that bursts out, but the kind that sits heavy, waiting. He could have argued, he could have shouted, but instead he forced a smile. A small, bitter smile that masked the storm inside. "Thank you for your time," he said, voice low, controlled. "I will look elsewhere." The receptionist blinked, surprised by his composure. She had expected him to stumble, to beg, to leave embarrassed. But he turned calmly, walking out with his head held high. Still inside, his pride was bleeding. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual chaos, cars honking, people rushing, vendors calling out. But Michael barely heard any of it. His mind replayed the scene over and over, each laugh cutting deeper. He sat on a bench by the bus stop, folder still in his lap. His hands clenched it so tightly the papers inside crumpled. He whispered under his breath, his accent heavy with emotion. "They think it's funny. They think I don't belong here." For a long moment, he just sat there staring at the ground. He felt small, diminished, like the dream he carried in his chest had been mocked into dust. But then, slowly, his breathing steadied. His shoulders lifted, his jaw tightened. He remembered his mother's words back home. Your voice is not weakness. It carries your story. Never bow your head to those who laugh at it. He straightened. His humiliation hardened into something else. Determination. This wasn't the end. They wanted to laugh at his accent? They wanted to humiliate him? He would make sure that one day they would choke on their laughter. He stood up, folder under his arm, and walked down the street with renewed resolve. His steps were heavier now, not with shame, but with purpose. The laughter still echoed in his ears. Every step he took away from that building felt heavier than the last. Michael tried to shake it off. He told himself it was nothing, just another insult in a long list of insults he'd endured since arriving in this country. But deep inside, something had cracked, something raw and painful. That night, he sat alone at the small table in his one-bedroom apartment. The walls were bare, the paint peeling. His dinner was nothing more than rice and lentils. He stared at the plate, but he wasn't hungry. He could still see her smirk, still hear her friend's laughter, still feel the sting of being told he didn't belong. He slammed his fist on the table, making the spoon rattle. No more, he whispered, his voice trembling but fierce. No more humiliation. The next morning, Michael was up before dawn. He ironed his only good shirt, tied his old shoes tight, and headed out. He took every odd job he could find, stacking shelves at a grocery store, sweeping floors at a cafe, unloading boxes at the docks. Each shift left him exhausted, his muscles sore, his feet aching, but with every paycheck, no matter how small, he put a little aside. Sometimes people mocked him there too. A coworker at the grocery store laughed at his accent when he asked for the price labels. A customer at the cafe imitated his voice when he repeated their order. Michael swallowed it all. Each insult became fuel. Each laugh became fire. He refused to let anger destroy him. Instead, he let it sharpen him. Late at night, when the city slept, Michael stayed awake. He sat at that same small table, a cheap second-hand laptop glowing in front of him. He researched how to start a business, how to build credit, how to invest with little money. The internet became his classroom. He read articles until his eyes blurred. He watched videos until dawn painted the sky outside his window. He scribbled notes in a battered notebook, page after page filled with plans, numbers, ideas. Some nights he fell asleep with his head on the desk, the pen still in his hand. He failed many times. A side hustle delivering groceries collapsed when his bike broke. An attempt at selling handmade crafts online ended with no sales. A small investment with a friend disappeared when the friend betrayed his trust. Each failure hurt. Each loss cut deep. But Michael didn't quit. Because every time he remembered that woman's laughter, every time he replayed her words, with that accent, you might not fit in, his determination flared brighter. He wasn't just chasing success. He was chasing dignity. Years passed. Michael's savings grew. Slowly, painfully, dollar by dollar. He lived frugally, sacrificing luxuries others took for granted. No fancy clothes, no vacations, just work, study, and relentless persistence. Routine. Eventually, his first small business took shape, a cleaning service. At first, it was just him, carrying buckets and mops to offices after hours. But word spread about his discipline, his reliability, his honesty. Clients recommended him to others. Soon he hired 2 workers, then 5, then 10. Within 3 years, his company had contracts with multiple businesses across the city. Michael still worked harder than anyone. He was the first to arrive, the last to leave, and the one who handled every problem personally. His accent never faded, but his voice grew firmer, more confident. Where once people mocked him, now they listened. One evening, after another long day, Michael sat in his modest office. It wasn't fancy, just a desk, a chair, and a filing cabinet. But it was his. He leaned back, scrolling through property listings on his computer. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was planning for more. He was thinking bigger. And then he saw it. A listing for a building. The picture on the screen made his breath catch. It was the same lobby, the same polished floors, the same reception desk where he had been mocked, where he had been told he didn't belong. That building was for sale. Michael stared at the screen, frozen. The memory of her laughter came rushing back, sharper than ever. He felt his jaw tighten, his hands curled into fists on the desk. Slowly, deliberately, he reached for his notebook. He opened to a fresh page. At the top, in bold letters, he wrote, "Goal, own that building." Beneath it, he began to write a plan. His pen moved quickly, his mind racing. Investments, loans, savings, partnerships, every possibility laid out in black ink. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about pride. It was about respect. It was about proving, not to them, but to himself, that he was worthy, that he belonged. Michael sat back at last, staring at the words on the page. A slow smile spread across his face. "Laugh now," he whispered, "but one day you will remember my accent differently. One day you will hear it as the voice of your owner." Michael's world had changed, but not enough. His cleaning business gave him stability, but his hunger was bigger than steady income. Each night, when he looked at the picture of that building, he felt the same fire. It wasn't enough to survive. He had to conquer. The climb wasn't easy. Banks turned him away at first. Not enough credit history. Too risky. "We can't approve your loan." Investors laughed at him, sometimes literally. One man smirked across the table and said, "You should stick to cleaning floors, son. Leave the real business to us." Michael left those meetings with his pride bleeding. But instead of quitting, he sharpened his strategy. He learned about partnerships. He studied contracts. He networked relentlessly, attending events where he felt out of place. Suits too cheap, accent too thick, skin too dark among the wealthy crowd. Some ignored him. Some mocked him. But a few listened. And those few became stepping stones. Within 5 years, Michael had expanded his company beyond cleaning. He branched into maintenance services, then logistics, then small-scale property rentals. Every contract he signed, every building he managed, every dollar he saved, he saw it as a brick in the foundation of his greater plan. The more he worked, the sharper he became. His confidence grew. His reputation spread. Soon, people weren't laughing at his accent. They were quoting his advice. But despite all the progress, he never forgot the beginning. One cold morning, as Michael reviewed his accounts, his assistant brought in a folder. "Sir, you might want to look at this." Michael opened the file, and his heart skipped. It was an updated listing. That building, the one that started it all, the one where his humiliation had burned into his soul. It was officially on the market again. Michael closed the folder slowly, his fingers pressing against the cover. He sat in silence for a long time, memories flooding back. The smirk, the laughter, the words that cut deeper than knives. And then he whispered to himself, "It's time." The process wasn't simple. He wasn't the only one interested in the building. Wealthy firms, developers, and big names circled it like sharks. The bidding war was fierce. Some doubted Michael could compete. Some whispered that he didn't belong in that room. But this time he didn't flinch. He walked into boardrooms with his head held high, his tailored suit sharp, his presence commanding. His accent was the same, but now it carried weight, authority, power. When others tried to push him aside, he pushed back, with numbers, with strategy, with a vision none of them could match. Weeks of negotiations followed. Documents, contracts, lawyers. Michael handled it all with precision. And finally the day came. In a glass-walled office high above the city, Michael sat across from the seller. The contract lay on the table, the pen waiting. He stared at the papers for a long moment. His mind flashed back to the lobby of that building, to the humiliation, to the laughter, to the vow he had made in that tiny apartment years ago. His hand didn't tremble. His signature was bold. With a single stroke of the pen, Michael became the owner of the very building where he had once been mocked and dismissed. He leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. It wasn't just real estate. It wasn't just an investment. It was justice. Michael whispered under his breath. Now, let's see who belongs. The building lobby hadn't changed much. The same polished floors, the same grand chandelier, the same reception desk. But Michael wasn't the same man who once stood here, humiliated and dismissed. He entered quietly, his stride calm, his suit sharp, his presence magnetic. Heads turned as he walked, not because of mockery this time, but because he carried the silent weight of authority. Behind the desk sat her, the receptionist. Older now, but the same smugness lingered in her posture. Beside her, her friend, the one who had laughed the loudest years ago. And they barely looked up when Michael approached. "Yes?" the receptionist said, voice clipped. "Do you have an appointment?" Michael smiled faintly. "No, I don't need one." She raised an eyebrow. "Then you'll have to—" She stopped. Her eyes flickered, recognition dawning. "You," she whispered. Her friend looked up, puzzled. "Who is it?" The receptionist's face paled. "I remember him. The one with the accent." The words hung in the air like poison. Michael's gaze was steady, his voice calm but laced with iron. "Yes, the one you laughed at, the one you mocked in front of strangers. The man you said didn't belong here." The friend scoffed nervously. "That was years ago. Why are you even bringing this up?" Michael stepped closer, placing a hand on the counter. His tone didn't rise, but the weight of his words pressed down like a storm. "Because some wounds never fade. Some scars remind us every single day why we fight harder, why we rise higher. You thought it was a joke, but your laughter became the fire that built an empire." The receptionist swallowed hard. "What do you want? Why are you here?" Michael reached into his briefcase, pulled out a thick folder, and laid it flat on the desk. The title page gleamed, Deed of Ownership. Her hands trembled as she read. "No, this can't be." Michael's smile was razor sharp. "It is. This building, the very place where you tried to break me, belongs to me now." The friend's jaw dropped. "You bought it?" Michael leaned in, his voice soft, dangerous in its calmness. "No, I earned it, with every sleepless night, every rejection, every door slammed in my face. I turned your insult into fuel. I turned humiliation into power. And today, I stand here not as your victim, but as your employer." Silence swallowed the room. Staff nearby froze, watching. The humiliation was no longer his, it was theirs. The receptionist's face burned red. "This isn't fair. You're just what?" Michael cut in, his voice sharp as glass. "Just a man with an accent? Just a black man who didn't belong? That's what you thought. That's what you laughed at. But look around. I belong more than anyone. And you're still sitting at the same desk while I'm sitting at the top." The friend muttered, desperate. "You can't hold this against us. It was a joke." Michael's eyes hardened. "A joke? You humiliated me in front of strangers. You made me feel small, but I refused to stay small. And now this," he tapped the folder, "is the punchline you never saw coming." The receptionist's hands shook. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Michael studied her for a long moment. The lobby was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. And then, with measured calm, he spoke. "What happens now is up to me. I could fire you on the spot. I could throw you out the way you once threw out my dignity. But I won't." Her eyes widened. Michael's tone softened, but his gaze was steel. "Because true power isn't in revenge. It's in rising above. You tried to bury me, but you planted a seed instead. And now you have to live with the sight of the man you mocked owning the ground beneath your feet." He straightened, closing the folder with finality. You don't have to respect me, but you will respect what I built. And every time you walk through these doors, you'll remember this day." The receptionist sat frozen, her arrogance shattered, her face pale with shame. Her friend looked down, unable to meet his eyes. Michael turned, his stride slow but unshakable. Staff members whispered as he passed, their admiration palpable. At the door, he paused, looked back once, and with a calm, proud voice, he said, "Never underestimate a man because of his accent or the color of his skin. Dignity always finds a way to rise." Then he walked out, the lobby silent behind him, the weight of his victory echoing long after he was gone.